There comes a moment in every life when the noise dies down. The world keeps spinning, people keep moving, but something in you, deep, silent aching, comes to a standstill. Maybe it's after the breakup, after the loss, after the betrayal. Or maybe it's not one moment at all, but a slow unraveling, a quiet sinking, until you no longer recognize the person you were before the pain came. And in that stillness, when the weight of emotional pain feels unbearable, we're left with two choices: to numb it, bury it, run from it, or to face it, feel it, and grow through it. Pain will visit every life. That's not a punishment. It's part of the deal of being human. But what we do with that pain, that's where everything changes. That's where transformation begins. This isn't a speech about getting over it. This is about getting through it, honestly, vulnerably, powerfully, and allowing your pain to become your purpose. Pain is not something we choose. It arrives uninvited in moments of loss, betrayal, disappointment, or even quiet loneliness. And when it does, the natural instinct is to resist it. We flinch, we close off, we look for escape routes. We tell ourselves to get over it, to be strong, to move on. But what if the real strength isn't found in pushing pain away, but in allowing it in? From a young age, we are taught to avoid discomfort. We're told not to cry, not to dwell, not to be too emotional. We receive messages that pain is weakness, that tears are shameful, and that we should aim to bounce back without ever truly processing what hurt us. So we develop strategies, sometimes conscious, sometimes automatic, to keep pain at arm's length. We distract ourselves with busyness. We numb ourselves with food, alcohol, work screens, or perfectionism. We fake smiles and say, "I'm fine," when our inner world is crumbling. We convince ourselves that if we just ignore it long enough, the pain will disappear. But emotional pain does not vanish with time or neglect. It doesn't dissolve simply because we pretend it doesn't exist. In fact, the more we avoid it, the more power it gains. Avoidance doesn't heal, it hides. And what we hide always finds a way to surface, whether through anxiety, burnout, rage, numbness, or even physical illness. The truth is that pressed pain doesn't stay silent forever. It whispers in the background until it finally screams. It shows up in broken relationships, in moments of self-doubt, in the inability to connect deeply with others, and in the persistent feeling that something is missing or wrong within us. When we avoid pain, we also avoid growth. Pain, as unwanted as it is a portal. It is a signal that something needs attention. It's the body's and soul's way of saying, there's something here to tend to. Emotional pain has a purpose. It invites us to go inward, to reflect, to question, and ultimately to evolve. But we cannot access its wisdom if we are too busy running from it. Facing pain is not easy. It requires us to be present in moments that feel unbearable. It asks us to sit with feelings we were taught to bury. It demands vulnerability, honesty, and patience. But in that space, where we stop running and start listening, we begin to unlock the true nature of healing. We start to realize that pain doesn't break us. It reveals us. It strips away the masks, the armor, the noise. It brings us face to face with our true selves. It's in those raw, quiet moments, when the tears come without warning, when our hearts ache without explanation, that we are being reshaped. Not destroyed, but reformed. Emotional pain softens us, stretches us, cracks us open so that light can get in. It builds resilience not through denial, but through presence. Each time we allow ourselves to feel fully, we deepen our capacity for empathy, for compassion, for connection, not only with others, but with ourselves. We live in a culture that glorifies control. We are taught that emotions must be managed, boxed in, kept neat. But emotions are not meant to be controlled. They are meant to be honored. Emotional pain especially demands reverence. It is not a nuisance or a flaw. It is a message. And if we have the courage to listen, it becomes our greatest teacher. It shows us where we're wounded, yes, but it also shows us where we're alive. The irony is that the very thing we're trying to escape, pain, is the one thing that can bring us back to wholeness. But we have to face it. We have to choose discomfort over denial. We have to sit in the mess long enough to understand what it's telling us. Because pain speaks a language of truth. It reveals our unmet needs, our unspoken fears, our buried longings. And in doing so, it points the way to what matters most. Avoiding pain may feel like self-protection in the moment, but in the long run, it is self-abandonment. When we numb our pain, we also numb our joy. When we suppress grief, we stifle gratitude. When we silence anger, we bury our passion. Emotional pain doesn't just hurt, it asks us to wake up. It asks us to reclaim the parts of ourselves we've been too afraid to feel. Choosing to feel is not a weakness. It is a radical act of courage in a world that tells us to be fine, to keep going, to move on. Feeling fully is how we process, integrate, and eventually transform pain into wisdom. It's how we break cycles of silence and shame. It's how we begin to love ourselves not for being unscathed, but for being honest and human. Facing emotional pain means creating space for it. Not fixing it, not analyzing it to death, not turning it into a productivity lesson, but simply being with it. Letting it move through us. Letting the tears fall. Letting the rage rise. Letting the grief be heard. It means whispering to yourself, I'm still here, even in the middle of the storm. It means reminding yourself that your pain is valid, that your feelings are real, and that you are not broken for feeling deeply. This is how we begin to heal. Not by escaping the hurt, but by standing in it. grounded, open-hearted, and willing to face what is real. Pain is not a detour. It is a doorway. And the key to opening it is not found in perfection or control. It's found in presence, in permission, and in the brave decision to feel what you feel. There's something quietly powerful about a scar. It does not scream for attention, nor does it hide in shame. A scar simply exists, evidence that healing has taken place. It is a physical or emotional reminder that something once tried to break you, and yet you survived. It may not be pretty, and it may not tell the whole story, but it stands as undeniable proof that you made it through. In a world that often demands flawlessness, perfection, and composure, your scars are revolutionary. They say, "I have been wounded, but I am still here." Too often, we are tend to conceal our pain. We are encouraged to patch ourselves up and pretend like nothing ever happened. We're told to smile and move on, as there are things that hurt us could be wiped away without consequence. But healing doesn't mean returning to who you were before the wound. Healing transforms you. It reshapes your identity, it alters your perspective, and it deepens your capacity for strength and compassion. And your scars are the signature of that transformation. There's an undeniable vulnerability in carrying scars, emotional or otherwise. They represent moments when life took us to our knees. They are the markings of heartbreak, failure, loss, betrayal, grief, or trauma, but they are also the outcome of resilience. They are the visible signs of survival, of battles endured, and of the strength it took to get back up again. They remind us not only of what we've been through, but of who we've become because of it. To bear a scar is not to be weak. It is to be brave. It means you dared to feel, dared to struggle, and dared to heal. You didn't shut down emotions completely. You didn't let the pain swallow you whole. And you didn't give up when it would have been easier to stop trying. Maybe you stumbled. Maybe you fell. Maybe you broke. But eventually you chose to mend. You chose to stand again, even if you were still trembling. And that choice, quiet and unseen by many, speaks volumes. There's beauty in that imperfection. In fact, the very things we often try to hide are the things that make us most human. No one goes through life untouched by pain. But while some people spend their lives hiding their wounds, others choose to wear their scars with honesty and courage. Not because they are proud of the pain, but because they are proud of the healing. They don't need to tell their whole story for the scar to carry meaning. It carries the weight of all that was felt, all that was endured, and all that was overcome. The world often applauds resilience from a distance, but turns away from the process it takes to get there. People want the triumph, not the tears, but the truth is that every triumph has a trail of pain behind it. Moments when it seemed impossible, nights filled with self-doubt, and days where putting one foot in front of the took everything you had. Your scars carry all of that. They are the evidence of the path you've walked and the mountain you've climbed. They whisper the stories you may not always say aloud. When we allow ourselves to see our scars as marks of survival rather than symbols of shame, we start reclaiming our power. We stop apologizing for our experiences. We stop pretending that everything has always been perfect. We stop hiding the messy, complicated, beautifully flawed parts of ourselves that actually make us real. And in doing so, we make space for others to do the same, because when you allow your scars to be seen, you give others permission to stop hiding theirs. Emotional scars are especially complex. They don't show up on our skin. They live in our hearts, in our minds, in the stories we carry inside. And yet, they shape how we see ourselves, how we trust others, and how we walk through the world. You may not be able to point to your emotional scars, but you feel them in your hesitation to love again, in your struggle to trust, in your fear of being vulnerable. And still, the fact that you keep trying, keep showing up, keep opening yourself despite the past, that is your strength. That is your resilience. That is your scars speaking for you. These internal scars are often the most misunderstood. Because they are invisible, people may not realize how much they've cost you. They don't see the silent battles, the private pain, or the effort it takes to keep going. But you do. You know the weight you've carried. And you know that healing, especially emotional healing, is not a straight line. It's full of starts and stops, good days and setbacks, moments of hope and moments of despair. The fact that you are still moving forward, even with all of that, is a testament to your inner strength. Every time you resisted the urge to give up, every time you choose to get out of when it felt pointless, every time you reached out for help when you were drowning in silence, those were victories. And they add up. They build over time. They may not always be visible, but they're real. And they are shaping you into someone who knows how to rise. Your scars are not meant to be erased. They are meant to be honored, not because the pain was beautiful, but is as you are. Because the person you've become, the one who feels more deeply, who loves more fiercely, who understands others more completely, has been shaped by what you've endured. Your scars have given you empathy. They've given you perspective. They've given you wisdom that no book or lecture could ever teach. So when you look in the mirror or reflect on your past, don't flinch at what hurt you. Look closely. Look with love. Because what you're seeing is not damage. It's strength. What you're seeing is someone who has walked through fire and came out with the courage to live more honestly, more fully, more vulnerably than before. That courage is stitched at every scar, telling a story not of what was broken, but of what has been rebuilt. Healing doesn't require perfection. It never has. Yet so many people wait to feel ready or strong enough before they start the process. They think they need to be emotionally stable, mentally prepared, or spiritually in light before they can begin facing what hurt them. But healing doesn't begin in a place of control or certainty. Healing begins in chaos. It begins when everything feels shattered and messy and raw. And the truth is, courage, not perfection, is what moves us forward. We live in a world that celebrates polished exteriors. We're praised when we have it all together, aired when we seem unaffected, and rewarded for composure. But the people who appear the strongest are often the ones carrying the heaviest invisible loads. They're the ones who keep smiling while hiding their pain, who keep showing up while quietly breaking inside. The pressure to be perfect, to present a brave, unbothered face to the world, can become barrier to real healing. Because healing asks something much different, and it asks us to be honest. It asks us to drop the act. It asks us to come as we are, bruised and unsure, and still choose to bend. Courage isn't about confidence. It's not about certainty. Courage is about taking the next step while fear and doubt are still whispering your ear. It's about standing in the middle of your pain and choosing not to abandon yourself. It's about showing up in the face of discomfort and deciding to stay open anyway. That kind of courage doesn't look glamorous. It often looks like tears at 2 a.m., shaky hands sending a message asking for help, or finally admitting, I'm not okay. And those moments, though invisible to most, are the beginning of transformation. There is no perfect timeline for healing. There is no checklist that guarantees results. It's a deeply personal, often unpredictable journey. One day you feel hopeful, and the next you feel like you're back where you started. That's not failure, it's reality. Growth is not linear. Healing is not neat. And waiting until you feel ready may mean waiting forever. The truth is, no one ever really feels ready to face their deepest wounds. But courage shows up anyway. It walks into the room even when the fear is still present. The myth of perfection in healing is damaging because it creates the illusion that vulnerability is weakness. But vulnerability is actually where the healing begins. When you allow yourself to be seen, fully, openly, imperfectly, you give yourself the freedom to feel, process, and release. You let go of the pressure to be okay all the time. And in that space, something softer and more powerful begins to emerge. You stop performing strength and you start living in truth. There is also a quiet kind of bravery in allowing yourself to fall apart. Because breaking open is often the only way light gets in. The pain you're holding on to. Grief, anger, confusion, fear. It needs room to breathe. And pretending everything is fine only suffocates it. Letting yourself fall apart doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're finally telling the truth. It means you're making space for something real to begin. Too many people believe that healing will come when they are calm, composed, and confident. But what if healing is what brings you those things? What if it's not the prerequisite, the result? What if you could stop waiting to be better and instead start where you are, right now, exactly as you are? That's what courage invites you to do. It says, I come broken, come confused, come messes come. This kind of courage isn't loud. It doesn't always announce itself with bold decisions or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to get out of bed and everything feels pointless. Sometimes it's showing up to therapy, even when you don't know what to say. Sometimes it's choosing not to numb out, even when the pain feels unbearable. Every small, brave act is a step toward healing, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. And courage doesn't mean you won't feel fear. Fear is part of being human. Fear tries to protect us from pain, but in doing so, it often keeps us stuck. Courage says, I know you're scared, but we're moving anyway. It doesn't erase the fear, but it reclaims your power from it. It says you don't have to have it all take a single step. We have to stop glorifying perfection as the standard for emotional wellness. Because true strength lies in imperfection. It lies in the willingness to feel deeply, to risk being misunderstood, to face the mess head on. You don't have to be healed to begin the healing. You just have to be willing to meet yourself where you are, with gentleness, honesty, and bravery. You may stumble. You may fall. You may feel like you're taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. That's part of it. That's not failure. That's being human. And every time you choose to keep going, even when it hurts, even when you're exhausted, even when you question if it's worth it, that is healing motion. That is what it means to be courageous, not perfect. There's a sacred, often terrifying power in knowing your story, the truth of your journey, your pain, your growth, your moments of collapse and rebuilding is not something to be silenced or hidden. It is something to be honored. When you share your truth, not for validation, not impress, not even to explain, but simply to express, you create a ripple effect that reaches far beyond what you can see. You make space for connection, understanding, and deep, transformative healing, not just for yourself, but for others too. Many people carry the weight of untold stories. They walk through life feeling isolated, no because they are alone, but because they believe their pain is something no one could understand. They believe that if people knew what they had been through, they would be judged, rejected, or viewed as broken, and so they stay quiet. They bury their experiences deep inside. They carry silent burdens, and in doing so, they deny themselves the relief of being heard and known. But when someone finally dares to speak, to share even a sliver of their truth, something shifts. Walls fall, guards lower, and suddenly, others realize they are not alone. Your story, no matter how painful or complicated, matters. It matters not because it needs to be tied up with a perfect ending or shared with eloquent words, but because it is real. And real is what people crave in a world full of filters, facades, and surface-level conversations. People are not moved by perfection. They are moved by honesty. They are drawn to truth, to rawness, to that trembling voice that says, "This is what I've lived through, and I'm still here." Sharing your story isn't about reliving the pain or getting stuck in the past. It's about reclaiming your narrative. It's about saying, this happened and I survived. This shaped me and I grew. This hurt me, but it didn't destroy me. When you speak your truth, you take back the power that silence held over you. You rewrite the story from the perspective of someone who endured, someone who learned, someone who decided that their voice would longer be buried under shame. And perhaps most importantly, when you tell your story, you become a mirror for others. You give voice to what they've been afraid to say. You name feelings they've been afraid to feel. You validate experiences they thought were theirs alone. In your vulnerability, you become a lighthouse for someone still lost in the dark. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be fully healed. You just need to be honest. Your truth is enough. Your presence is enough. It's easy to believe that your story must be tied up in resolution before it can be shared, that you must have moved past the pain, gained wisdom, or achieved success. But some of the most powerful stories are still unfolding. Some of the most powerful moments are found in the middle. When you're still figuring it out, still navigating the unknown, that's where connection happens. In the raw, unedited, unscripted places where hearts speak to hearts. So many people are waiting for permission to be real. They are waiting for someone to go first. Someone to say, me too, to say, this is what I went through. Someone to say, I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. When you share your story, you become that someone. You give others the courage to face their own truth, to unearth their own voice, and to believe that healing is possible. Even when it feels far away, there is a misconception that vulnerability is weakness. But vulnerability is the birthplace of Kanakhan. It's the bridge between isolation and intimacy, between fear and freedom. It doesn't demand that you reveal everything, but it does ask you to be real. It asks you to stop pretending, to hide in behind, I'm fine. To stop minimizing your experiences. When you own your story, you give your pain a purpose. You turn it into a catalyst for change. You allow it to be more than a source of suffering. You allow it to become a message, a mission, a movement. Your voice is powerful, even if it trembles, even if it cracks, even if it only says a few words. Speaking your truth doesn't require a platform. It requires presence. It requires the willingness to be seen, to be heard, and to believe that your story matters. And it does, because in your truth is a thread of the unit of all humanity. In your truth is the echo of someone else's silent battle. In your truth is the potential to awaken something in another person that helps them feel seen, understood, and inspired to keep going. Telling your story is not about gaining attention. It's about offering connection. It's about building bridges between hearts. It's about showing others and yourself then you are not defined by what hurt you, but by how you chose to rise. It's about shifting the narrative from shame to strength, from silence to empowerment. And in doing so, you become not just the whir of your own healing, but a part of someone else's too. Because every time you speak with truth, someone listening learns that they can too. There's a profound transformation that happens when we stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what can I create from this? Pain in its rawest form feels senseless. It disorients us. It shakes our foundations, leaves us questioning everything. But as time unfolds and healing begins, pain reveals itself as more than just suffering. It becomes fertile ground, an emotional soil in which purpose can be planted and grown. It's not that the pain is inherently good or noble. It's that we are powerful enough to make us something meaningful from it. Purpose isn't something we stumble upon by accident. It's something we uncover through experience, especially through adversity. The most powerful, soul-driven callings don't emerge from comfort. They are born in struggle. When we're brought to our knees by life, when everything we once depended on crumbles, we begin to ask deeper questions. We begin to pay attention in a new way. Pain sharpens our awareness. It forces us to slow down and look inward. It strips away distractions, ego, and illusions. What's left is truth, often uncomfortable, often raw, but always real. In that space of rawness, purpose whispers. It doesn't shout. It nudges. It shows up in small insights, subtle shifts, and quiet realizations. It shows up when you realize that the thing that nearly broke you is also the thing that could help someone else heal. It shows up when you find yourself drawn to write, speak, create, or support in ways you never did before. It shows up when your empathy deepens, when your presence becomes more intentional, when your wounds begin to transform into wisdom. And none of this is immediate. Purpose is a process. It is slow and sacred, deeply personal. Pain has the potential to become a mirror, a reflection of what matters most to you. When something hurts deeply, it points to what you value. Losing someone may awaken a longing to war fully. Betrayal may ignite a passion for truth and justice. Struggling with self-worth may lead to a calling to uplift others who feel unseen. The pain doesn't define your purpose, but can refine it. It can shape it. It can carve out clarity in a way that peace never could. When we allow ourselves to move through pain rather than around it, we begin to reclaim our power. We stop being passive recipients of our suffering and start becoming active participants in our healing. And in that healing, we create space for something new. Purpose grows from that space, not because we planned for it, because we allowed it, because we chose not to let the pain be the final word. Because we dared to believe that even this could be used for good. There's a quiet, fierce kind of courage that arises when make your pain purposeful. It's the courage to show up differently, to speak truth into silence, to walk alongside others who are hurting, not from a place of superiority, but from solidarity. People who have suffered and chosen to grow are often the most compassionate, the most grounded, the most impactful voices in any room. Not because they're perfect or healed beyond recognition, but because they are real, because they have sat in the darkness and found a way to carry light. Turning pain into purpose doesn't mean glorifying what hurt you. It doesn't mean pretending you're glad it happened. It means honoring what you've endured, allowing it to guide you towards something greater. It means saying, I didn't choose this, but I will choose what I do with it. That is radical ownership. That is emotional alchemy. And it is available to anyone willing to face the fire and rise from the ashes. Purpose found through pain is often unshakable. It's not built on surface level motivations or external validation. It's built on lived truth. It's rooted in authenticity. It's fueled by resilience. And because of that, it has a depth and weight that resonates. It shapes movements. It changes lives. It ripples outward in ways we may never fully understand. Sometimes all it takes is telling your story. Sometimes it's starting a conversation. Sometimes it's offering your presence to someone who is still where you once were. These may seem like small acts, but they are world-changing in their impact. And there's something deeply healing about discovering that your pain doesn't have to be just a memory of suffering. It can become a wellspring of service. It can become the foundation of a mission. It can be the reason you write that book, start that nonprofit, create that art, launch that business, raise that awareness, or simply show up for people in a way only you know how. Because no one can teach what you've learned the way you can. No one can carry your message with your voice. No one else has lived your version of pain, and therefore, no one else can offer your version of purpose. Even when it feels impossible to see beyond the ache, trust that the story is still unfolding. Trust that the fire you're walking through can light the way for someone else later. Purpose isn't found in the absence of pain. It's often unearthed through it. Crafted in the moments you thought would break, but instead taught you who you are. When you begin to ask not just, why did this happen to me? But what can grow from this? You take the first step toward transforming your pain into something meaningful, lasting, and deeply aligned with your truth. We often confuse strength with silence. We think being strong means holding it all together, never letting anyone see us cry, never admitting when we're afraid, and certainly never showing the parts of ourselves that are uncertain or tender. But real strength is not built on denial or pretending. Real strength is built on truth, and truth requires vulnerability. It takes tremendous courage to let someone see you, not the polished version, not the carefully curated highlight reel, but the real, messy, honest you. That is where transformation begins. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the rawest form of emotional bravery. It's choosing to show up fully when you don't know how you'll be received. It's letting yourself be seen when every thint is telling you to hide. It's asking for help when pride wants you to push everyone away. And it's sitting in your own discomfort without rushing to numb it, distract from it, or pretend it's not there. Vulnerability is a choice, a conscious decision to live with your heart open, even after it's been broken. We live in a culture that celebrates the parents of strength, toughness, stoicism, resilience in the form of just keep going no matter what. But strength that comes from hiding your pain is fragile. It cracks under pressure. It isolates you, keeps you in survival mode. True strength, the kind that sustains you, grows from honesty. It says, this is hard. I'm hurting. I'm scared. Or I don't know what to do. And when you say those things out loud, not just to yourself, but to someone else, you take your first step toward healing. The paradox of vulnerability is that it feels like exposure, but it builds connection. It feels like weakness, but it creates strength. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give others permission to do the same. We create spaces where people can be real instead of perfect. We tear down the walls of shame and isolation, and we begin to see each other, not as flawed, but as human. Being vulnerable doesn't mean sharing everything with everyone. It's not about oversharing or performing emotion. It's about being genuine, intentional, and present. It's about the truth when it matters most. It's about letting the mask slip just enough to show what's underneath. And it's about trusting that who are, as you are, is worthy of love, care, and belonging. This kind of strength is quiet. It's not flashy or dramatic. It's found in small, everyday acts of courage. Saying, I'm not okay, when you've always been the strong one. Letting someone hug you when your instinct is to pull away. Admitting you're struggling instead of powering through it alone. Choosing to forgive yourself for not being perfect. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of growth, maturity, and deep-rooted resilience. Vulnerability also allows us to access deeper emotional truths. It opens the door to self-compassion, and when we stop judging ourselves for feeling broken or lost, we begin to see those moments as part of the journey. We begin to treat ourselves with the same kindness we'd offer a loved one. We recognize that healing doesn't happen in spite of our vulnerability. It happens because of it. There's a raw, honest beauty in saying, I don't have all the answers, but I'm still here. There's power in admitting that you're trying, even when it feels hard. When you let yourself be vulnerable, you stop pretending to be something you're not. And in doing so, you give your inner self, the part of you that's tender, emotional, intuitive, and wise, a voice. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to live in integrity with who you really are. We often build walls around ourselves, thinking they will keep us safe. But those walls become cages. They keep us disconnected. They may protect us from being hurt, but they also prevent us from being loved, understood, or truly seen. Vulnerability breaks those walls down. It replaces distance with intimacy, superficiality with depth, and fear with authenticity. Even in relationships, vulnerability is the foundation of connection. Without it, conversations remain shallow. Without it, trust is impossible. When you open up about your fears, your dreams, your disappointments, and your hopes, you allow people to meet you where you really are, not where you pretend to be. And in doing so, you build trust that's grounded in mutual respect and shared humanity. In healing, vulnerability becomes a tool. It's the way you process what happened to you. It's the way you begin to rewrite the story you've told yourself about your worth, your value, and your future. Vulnerability invites you to say, this hurt me, without shame. It invites you to acknowledge the impact of your experiences without minimizing them. And it allows you to explore your own emotions with honesty rather than resistance. The strongest people are not ones who never cry. They are the ones who cry and still choose to rise. They are the ones who have the courage to ask for what they need, to admit when they're in pain, and to keep showing up even when it's uncomfortable. They don't armor up and they open up. And because of that, they build deeper relationships, stronger communities, and richer lives. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we don't lose control. We gain clarity. We begin to see what really matters. We stop chasing perfection and start embracing presence. We learn to trust the process, to hold space for complexity, and to live with more compassion for ourselves and others. We stop hiding behind strength and start living from it. Because vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength, it's the path to it.